Hey, yeah, reading through the content. Exactly. Now we're ready. Do we actually know each other? Do we actually know each other? Lenders and lenders, property owners with property agents. Cutting corners is such a cookie cutter way. Exactly. For the glory of comfort. Cutting corners is such a cookie cutter way. Exactly. So that goes into the puns document. Es ist leicht. Es ist so leicht, so fun and easy. Lock it in and knock it out. Easy. For it. So yes, balance. How to let the process happen. How to get out of the way. Hang on. Let me grab the... Ja, the earplugs. The earplugs, your way. Balance. How to let the process happen. How to get out of the way. Why we are in imbalance. Head-driven action that defies the natural process, because there's something, a natural inclination that would come natural through us and from us. And we want to find out, how do we align with that? How do we resolve everything that is getting in the way of following the natural inclination? Because usually our natural inclination is always right now. In humans, there's something that is called an interference mechanism. Meaning, we have the ability to interfere with our natural inclination. In the same way as animals, such as dogs, for example, have this interference mechanism also, they are able to not act out on their impulses. Meaning, you can teach a dog and train a dog to not bite a child, or not bite a biker, a bicycle, a cyclist driving by. That is interference. In the same way, we can interfere with our own natural process of wanting to do something, going with our natural inclination of doing something. Now, there's also a component of intuition that is woven into all of that. Our intuition is our very own bodily intelligence that knows best what we need. It takes all of the factors into consideration. Our mind only takes the logical, linear, and verbal factors into consideration, whereas our intuition takes into consideration all of the factors, also the emotional reasons and the circumstances, and it gives out an emotional response that can only be felt. That's why our intuition is part of our feelings, in the same way as our emotions and our body sensations are, because they can only be felt. They cannot really mentally be grasped. Now, they can mentally be abstracted, so we can talk about that. They can be conceptualized, but they can only really be felt. The experience of that can only be felt. So how to follow your heart, finding the passion and making life-altering decisions, finding the core wounds and extracting the essences. Exactly. So that's the core point here. We want to find out the wounds that we have, and we need to extract the essences out of that. So we need to find a way to look at what it is that has been happening to us, so that we can get out of our own way with that. How life works. Why doesn't my life work out? Imbalance, not being myself. How to make my life work out, getting in balance and being yourself. How the mind works, explaining the condition. Beers, pubs, launching brands in the case. 3 different psychometric tests. Basic wrapper. Exactly. So this is everything that goes into Mr. What is his name? Cleaning up my documents here among my friends. Man, everything is so nice and clean. This is brilliant. This is truly beautiful. His name is William Coates, exactly, at the very last here. That is his name. X-bar owner. Exactly. Alright, cool, great. Okay, well, that works. Tactics go into complexity and the strategy comes back to the basics. So what I want to find out is, how do we decode human behavior? How do we find and understand the human psyche in its way. Because before I always was too extreme. I thought I only need the book knowledge and going deep into that, where the truth is I actually really enjoy making connections and being connected to people, knowing that I'm valued and worthy of people's attention and that people pay attention to me and that they want me and want to spend time with me and that I am of value, that I am bringing value to people and making and being useful to people, to high-level business owners. Exactly. Methodology, the backwards approach, seeing what is holding us back in truth and in adult self-honesty. Then learning to focus on something higher. That could be something that we want or the divine. I want to make it really practical. I don't teach concepts about life that I've read in a book, but real life experience. Therefore, living is the more important practice than reading, obviously. And I've been reading more than 100 books on everything about psychotherapy and healing work and all of that. And I can confidently tell you that I've spent more than 10,000 hours inside of yourself. And the one learning that I'm building up to, the one revelation, there's a build-up in the same way as he was building up his script to the end revelation, that he has been missing his audience, and that it is important that you actually do something that you enjoy. The whole build-up is around one key point per video. So if we have self-healing for business owners, we make the plot towards healing and towards being a better leader, that all of that leads to basically becoming and being a better leader in that way. So are we unconsciously projecting the past or the future, or are we using the future to make use of the present? Which one is put emphasis on and is running us? Also for the intuition, there needs to be the reference to the substance to give rise to the concept. Alright, path. Alright, cracking deals left and right, and now we're going forward here. What are people programmed to look for in the finality? So what can be an objective finality to give people the reference or the big picture? So basically that means, where do you put your emphasis? If the objective is lacking, the subjective seems objective, the relative seems absolute, a new reference gives perspective. So the question becomes, are we unconsciously projecting the past onto the future, or are we using the future to make use of the present? Which one is put emphasis on and is running us? Also for the intuition, there needs to be the reference of the substance to give rise to the concepts. In seeking relief, using the disease to go forward, to expand health into the future instead of wanting to go back to the past. So in focusing on the past and the used to be state, we are in a loop that is samsara. Life is not cyclical, but it is a spiral. It goes back to the used to be state, but focused on the future. It is an unconscious belief and an affirmation of disease if you seek ease when you experience disease. Because the ease depends on the disease to be there. The more substantive is the substance, is the suffering. Substantive is a great word. So we are copying that over into our vocabulary sheet. Es ist so leicht, so fun and easy to have everything clean and organized and in order. Es ist so leicht, es ist so leicht, es ist so leicht. Substantive. Alright, further forward. So, using my intellectual capacities to understand, and even if I don't know the flavor from experience, I can act as advised and experiment with myself. The subjective flavor needs to be traded for a new super subjective flavor of a new personal experience that makes the old flavor bland and tasteless, unattractive. So the absolute can be experienced through the super subjective. Alright, there's something in here. See where people are. You are already looking for something, but there are two visions of the thing that you are looking for, and you are just giving another perspective. So we redefine the goal. The assumed goal behind the longing might be relief, the subconsciously assumed. So how do we shift the centering on the substantial state of love and happiness instead of liberation from the relative? The goal has its own identity, but it's relative, the goal, or it's a side effect of looking for something more substantial. What is the goal that is a goal in and of itself and not only the absence of something? So this is also a great piece of content. There's something in here. So the teacher doesn't bring the concept, he brings the dynamic with the concept or the teaching. The teacher doesn't teach life in his way of teaching, that he brings the dynamic. Self-knowledge. Self-knowledge, as I use it, means understanding of the personal specific conditioning in my psyche. Not self-knowledge. No self-knowledge is required, but often it is necessary. That means that you don't have to, and it's not a linear product. Self-knowledge leads to enlightenment, but often it is needed. Self-knowledge has the purpose of breaking identification with behavior, emotion, and thought. We come to see that we behave in ways today that are rooted in the association patterns that we have formed in childhood about ourselves, our parents, and the world. So self-knowledge is best used to break identification. So we need to be aware to not make it into a story of me and identify with it. We want to be aware that we don't use it to explain ourselves and make ourselves right through justification or giving us explanatory security and something to hold on to through a coherent narrative. Explanatory and coherent are two great words. Hey ya ya oh me ya ya oh me ya oh ya. Explanatory and coherent. Something to hold on to through a coherent narrative that stems from the belief that we are not okay and need to justify. Self-knowledge is best used from a place of non-attachment to any outcome. Its main purpose is to train and manifest a way of behaving towards what arises in the inner world, to meet everything with acceptance and fearless curiosity. We don't get to know ourselves in order to achieve something. We best look at it as a practice where nothing important is gained. Means to gain self-knowledge, inner child work. Understanding that our behavior patterns have a root cause and that they serve. The root cause is some association pattern formed in childhood related to parental affection, and they serve the survival of the child back then. Video number 1. What was expected of me? How must I not be? So the child internalizes the parental expectations from how you should be to how I want to be and how you must not be to how I don't want to be. Was wir an unseren Eltern auszusetzen hatten, was wir an ihnen vorgeworfen haben, was wir an ihnen verachtet haben, wovor wir uns geekelt haben, wovor wir uns gefürchtet haben, was wir vermisst haben und wonach wir uns gesehnt haben, was wir nie sein oder werden durften oder wollten. Video 1. Triggers. Mirror work. What we're triggered by in the interaction with others, we are triggered by within ourselves. What behavior characteristic in another person or what life event evokes an emotional reaction that is stronger than the neutral person would react to? So in what situation do I feel that there is additional emotional charge that I might be surprised about where it is coming from? It feels amplified compared to a normal and authentic spontaneous reaction. 3 patterns. Habits. Every habit serves a purpose. The purpose is achieving balance of body, mind, trauma, etc. It could be balancing you energetically, so the habits that drain your energy or that give you rest to gain energy, these are release patterns and replenishment patterns. Exactly. Recurrent situations that evoke a certain denied or suppressed emotion or aspects of yourself or trauma that you need to be confronted with. They serve in that way the healing process, attracting people that display certain characteristics, relationship partners, patterns in children, among your siblings, and throughout generations. Exactly. So here's why that happens. One video, and we will be exploring all of that. So habits. So why do we do that? What is the reason for that? So why do we, for example, overeat? What's the reason for that? Well, every behavior has a reason. That means no behavior happens for no reason. There's always something to be found. And when we want to change a behavior, we want to decode the behavior so that we find the actual cause of the behavior. Because no behavior happens for no reason. It may happen spontaneously and feel spontaneously, but there's a reason why. In the same way as, when a tree falls over because it's rotten inside. It may seem spontaneous, but it's based on laws of physics. It's like the gravity pulls it, and the trunk was so rotten inside that it just pulled over. So it doesn't happen for no reason. It has a reason, and there's an explanation why. So in the same way, we can explain every habit that we have and every behavior, even the ones that we experience that we don't want to experience. There's a reason why. And so we are likely not going to be able to change the behavior long term if we don't understand the reason, because the way to change the behavior has to be directed towards the reason, not the behavior in itself. Now, we may be able to force ourselves to change the behavior, but then it is like forcing yourself to give up cigarettes and you start eating cake instead, or drinking, or whatever else you do, right? Biting your fingernails. It has to have a substitute for that, because the reason is not dealt with. For example, I always smoke when I need a break mentally, but I don't allow myself to take a break mentally during my work. And I feel only if I need to smoke, I would have a reason for that. So if that doesn't happen, you're going to find something else. And sometimes even something worse, right? So every habit serves a purpose, and we need to find out the reason for that. So when it is overeating, for example, what can be the reason for that? Well, it can be, first of all, an emotional release pattern, meaning that you have some emotion that is stuck that is being released through that, because only when that happens we then feel these emotions, and that could be anger, or that could be a feeling of defeat. Let's take the feeling of anger, for example, the emotion of anger. Now, when you have some beliefs, for example, that anger must not be expressed or something bad because it was painful to you. You maybe were the recipient of actions that came out of anger, clearly. And so you promised yourself that you're going to be different than that person, likely parent that this has happened with. And so you are judging and repressing anger in other people, and obviously also the energy of anger within yourself. But here's the truth. Every human has that. It's part of our range of emotions, and it's evolutionary adaptive, meaning it serves a purpose in some ways. So we have to have it. We cannot just wish it away and believe it's going to be gone. Because if we just ignore it, it will just be there. Just because you ignore the trash in your backyard doesn't make it go away. It may push it out of your consciousness because you're not seeing it, you're avoiding seeing it, but it's still there, and it's going to be degrading the soil underneath. So you got to take care of it at some point. Right? And the same way with the anger. So you got to take care of it at some point, and it might be a release pattern towards this anger, meaning whenever we're doing this behavior afterwards, we're feeling so angry towards ourselves that we then start releasing that anger. And only in these moments when this certain behavior happened, we give ourselves the permission to actually let go of this anger. So that's why we keep doing these behaviors even though we think we don't want to. And the reason why we keep being drawn towards that is because they are linked in our nervous system with that, right? In the same way as advertising. It's like you see a certain type of chocolate and you think of Valentine's Day. And all the good things that came from that, you're like, oh man, maybe I have this experience again if I get some more chocolate. That was incredible, right? Or Coca-Cola and feeling happy, or whatever else you associate, right? Through advertising. It's the same thing, because they're coupled. Right? Your brain remembers that the emotion and the thing go together in the same way as the overeating and the release of anger go together. And so if it piles up, your mind will find excuses to justify the behavior that leads to the anger and makes you unconsciously drawn towards this direction. That's why just the, trying to not be angry is a misguided attempt, right? Now you can find a way to use your anger in different ways, and that might be part of the solution. But we really need to find out, what does the overeating serve? What does it serve? And anger is not the only reason. Let me explain another example. For example, when after the overeating you always feel sad about yourself, right? It's not like you're like, anger, oh, why did I do this again? Fuck, it happened again, I'm so out of control. But it's like anger is like, oh man, I can't control it, it's so bad. And then you feel all the other things inside of you as well, right? It's a release of that. So basically, because you're not allowing yourself to feel the sadness and the anxiety that you're feeling, you're not allowing that it comes up in certain circumstances, especially right now, since we're going through some pretty uncertain times. You gotta just wake up every day and be happy that you're alive still. And for the longest time, this always has been part of the human experience. It's like, the lion could have eaten you or your wife at any time, right? So nothing really has changed. It's just now, the illusion of security and certainty and stability has vanished, and now it's like, okay, every day, one more time to be alive, let's do what I'm doing in my life. And if I get another day, I get another day, and if not, then I guess that's life, right? And so with that, there's a lot of anxiety that people feel, especially people who are very certainty-oriented. And I also was very certainty-oriented. Now, I had a certain proclivity towards risk and towards a threshold for uncertainty, but especially people who need like a lot of security and certainty, they are losing their mind. A lot of them have died already. right? Because they just couldn't handle that. They're like, man, I do not want to be here, and so they're not anymore, right? Either self-induced or life took them, right? That's possible. And so, yeah, you've probably realized that in your family and friend circles, a lot of people have passed, and yeah, that's part of it. As unfortunate as it is. And so feeling the anxiety and feeling other kinds of emotions, we need to feel them. And if we don't feel them, if we just avoid them, they build up, and as this build-up releases, in the same way as, you know, when you are very hungry, you think about food. When you are sexually charged, you think about, you know, whatever that means for you, that release. So in the same way as for when the anxiety builds up, or when sadness builds up and you don't feel it, and it builds up and it builds up, and then the triggers become even more, you become more sensitive towards the triggers. And so you are drawn towards the behaviors that your brain has remembered are linked to your feeling and releasing these emotions. That's what I mean with the behavior, with decoding the behavior, because, you know, when you go to a therapist or a coach and you generally say, I'm overeating, what I'm doing then is I'm looking for the real reason, right? And because otherwise you're kind of just guessing, I would say, right? Unless you really hire a specialist who has dealt with overeating a lot, but if you just generally go to somebody and get advice, it's like, I think really this is the way to change behaviors lastingly, right? We really want to find out what the behavior is giving you. What is the behavior giving you, right? So recurrent situations that evoke a certain denied or suppressed emotion or an aspect of yourself or trauma that you need to be confronted with. That serves in a way the healing process. So attracting people that display certain characteristics, relationship partners, patterns in the child, in children, among siblings, or throughout generations. And so what I was saying is, it can be an anger release pattern, it can be a sadness release pattern, or it can just be a method, a means to let your nervous system relax. So if we constantly overwork ourselves, that might be a way where our nervous system then relaxes, right? These are all ways how that can be done. So what is my overarching sense of purpose, my goals, etc.? So happiness and fulfillment for people, igniting the sense of vitality, awe, and beauty for life, being an ambassador for life, understanding the language of life, bringing it in the wording so that people can understand, reuniting their sense of awe, beauty, and respect for life, finding a deep-seated place, your essence and fulfillment and bliss is the subtlety of life in small moments, finding the juice of life through overcoming your obstacles, psychotherapy, getting in touch with your emotions and seeing beyond the false ego, etc. Right? Helping people connect, because most of us are feeling isolated and lonely, right? Helping people connect because most of us are feeling isolated and lonely. Showing people how to follow their hearts and listen to the inner voice to then make the experience of life working out smoothly. Bridging spiritual and psychotherapeutic knowledge. Changing the world by facilitating change in the individual, bridging spiritual and psychotherapeutic knowledge to the masses for them to experience a life of happiness, fulfillment, and moments of bliss and emotion, to have them discover the juice of life. Changing the world by facilitating change in the individual, and getting help by people, building a global movement at which people act by themselves and contribute to the advancement and spreading of the message. Exactly. So we're putting this into the mission document. Into the mission document. Exactly. Entrepreneurs, helping people to the kingdom of heaven within. One of my values and value that I bring my clients is orderliness and cleanliness to digital systems. Vision journal. Exactly. All right. Content. Connection. What is my particular position in life? So the example of the hand reaching for the food. So who am I? Why am I here? And what am I for? How are people starting to try to form connection? And what is the structural archetype? Based on attraction, something in common that includes us, mutual benefits and complementary differences. Complementary and commonality are two great words that I am going to include in my vocabulary list. Exactly. Great work. In overcoming my own insecurities about projects, serving, and self-obsession, I learned from experience by doing it how to teach that to people. So my previous greatest holdback can now be my greatest gift to inspire. Certainty, brevity, and honesty. Video 2. Inspiration happens by us seeing something in the other that we would like in ourselves. And that can be an achievement, for example, rapport or connection. It happens through seeing some commonality in the other person and you. So for example, sharing some insecurity or personal story. To really reach people, we need both. So talk about the things that you've got, life experience, but also to train ourselves in honesty. Because once done and overcome, we realize that being honest and sharing truth is not at all as bad as we imagined. Many motivational speakers talk only about their successes or their failure stories when they can be linked to some success. Honesty. Honesty means speaking truth. Truth is personal. It means revealing what is perceived or experienced to be there within you. This is a great piece of content. From slave to servant. A slave is someone who does something against his will and is helpless to do otherwise. A servant is a life is a wise person. Being a slave implies bondage. Being a servant by volition requires wisdom. When we are being run by automatic programming, we are slaves. By serving life, we acquire wisdom. Honesty bonds, it creates rapport, and honesty liberates. You feel relieved and the other person finds courage to also open up. Honesty means being a leader. Honesty serves the other as well as you. Do we need to be honest the whole time? No, that's another ideal. I will still sometimes tell people things that are not true, but having the honesty to admit that is what's key. Teachings on life. Impermanence. Life is change. The cycles of life consist of growth. Consist is a great word. We put that into our vocabulary. Consist of. The cycles of life consist of growth and expansion, reaching a tipping point and going the other way into decline. Life is the assimilation, decline, assimilation, dissimulation of the plant. Exactly. Great. So the lesson is that change is inevitable. Only when we think that things won't change, we are mistaken. While in relationships, jobs, etc., change comes. So instead of being surprised and coping with the change, we may anticipate it because it is a law of life. Exactly. Life is cyclical movement. This is great content as well. The cycles of life, growth and expansion, reaching a tipping point and growing the other way into decline, like the assimilation and dissimulation in the plant. Structures are built up and broken down again. So the lesson is that change is inevitable. Only when we think that things won't change, we are mistaken. So while in relationships, jobs, etc., change comes. So instead of being surprised and coping with the change, we may anticipate it because this is a law of life. So life is cyclical movement, it is flow. The universe expands and contracts like waves in the ocean. For no reason, it is only a play of energy. Also, life has certain seasons. It makes sense to ride the waves so that it can carry us. In the same way, we might focus on ourselves first when we are young and single to understand life and focus on a bigger proportion about receiving so that we can go with the cycle of giving once we have children. The forms of this world arise out of nothingness. It is one of life's great paradoxes. Existence comes out of non-existence. Fullness comes out of emptiness. So the non-successful approach is to fill ourselves out of this perceived emptiness. The successful approach would be to feel the emptiness and see the fullness that is coming out of it. Major lessons in life to learn. Non-resistance versus resistance. Initiation without force. We don't force results. Results are let go of. Actions are invited. Balance versus imbalance. Faith versus seeking validation. Opening and letting go instead of contraction. Surrender instead of making happen. Making the study of life and of your conditioning a learning priority. The gift of our society is that we get triggered a lot, a great opportunity to unveil our triggers. Great piece of content. It's all the emotions that we seek. Identify what is missing right now. What would be needed for the life of your dreams? Then to discover the emotions behind that. Life goes by itself. There are two polar opposite modes of living life, from the head and from the heart. That which comes naturally and spontaneously out of you, and that which you make happen against your natural tendency. When we feel closer to the beating of our heart than to the thoughts in our head, we are on the right track. By following the path of the heart, we end up with the life of our dreams. Maybe not exactly in the form, but in the essence. Maybe not in the form that we dream of, but in the feeling that we associate to it. Following the way of the heart will make the longing cease and lead us to where we feel everything is okay the way that it is. It takes different amounts of time for different people. The experiences that one can make on this path are the following. I have made important life decisions to get out of life circumstances that are detrimental to me, and decisions to affirm life circumstances that serve us. Detrimental is a great word. I'm going to remember this. Exactly. I have realized that thinking about myself and others go hand in hand. Part of the work I am doing is geared towards serving others. I have realized that there is a different flavor of enjoyment and fulfillment that comes from serving others. Through having weeded out life circumstances that don't serve me, I have created life circumstances that do serve me, and others that have created life circumstances to realize that I'm okay the way that I am. I am realizing that because I was so out of balance, my thoughts would only go so deep, period. So I could only really think about myself, and I was so distracted that my thoughts didn't really reach any significant depth. And I also know that a lot of other people in this world are still in this place, and so they then feel attracted to my content. Through having weeded out life circumstances that don't serve me and created life circumstances that do serve me and others, I have created an environment to realize that I am totally okay the way that I am. In feeling that, I also feel that everything that arises in the external and internal world is totally okay the way that it is. That does not mean that I approve of it or that I must not act upon it, but things that are presented are accepted. Further on my path, I have made the experience that there is a difference in acceptance. Whereas I before accepted things after initial resistance, now I accept things without realizing and reflecting upon this acceptance. It's not to become totally like nature again, but to act a little bit more in alignment. So as an example of reference of the opposite polarity, we as humans have the choice, nature has not. So it has to be checked with the intuition where on the polarity we need to respond from to the moment that arises. To act out of the place of ego, we adapt to society. Acting from a place of nature, we adapt to life. This is here a great piece of content. A little bit more in alignment with life. So, to take nature is the first reference, shifting the emphasis of focus. In the same way as the ego arises out of nature and is consequent to nature, the interference of the natural, our first reference is how nature would act and respond. Let's take the tree as an example of how to live our lives with ourselves when we are by ourselves going through life. Like the tree, there are two worlds, the inner and the outer. They both depend upon each other and need each other to expand, so it is the internal work and life practice. Internally, it is about seeing what you don't see, and on the outside, it is about serving and giving more space to more life by expanding your branches. Life teaches us from the outside in. We observe a certain relation with life, we make it a personal realization based on reference to some general archetypical teaching, but we need to affirm this realization by entering a new relation with life based on this realization. Learning works if we reference something new to something known. If it's entirely unrelatable to something known, we are either indifferent or confused. So the first learning happens in reference to the absolute, which is intuitively known or experientially known. The included doesn't interfere with the process that is suggested by the inclusive. In that way, the included doesn't suffer the consequence of separation. It is adjusted so that the change in the process can still flow through it, but it doesn't try to alternate the process. Adapting instead of alternating is the teaching. There are different processes in our own lives of high and low energy, and this is now enough, and now we go and eat dinner. Wie ein Gentleman und nicht wie ein asozialer Spinner.